Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm joining you here from Jerusalem, and I'm so excited to see there are people here from, I feel like there's so many countries here. Each one of you is from a different country. It's very exciting, and I'm really happy that you're all joining us today. I'm going to give a little introduction about my role in the National Library of Israel and what we do with educators. And then we're just going to dive right into the story of Chana Senesh. And I'll show you the educational kit, the time capsule that we've created for you to use in your classrooms and teach your students about this remarkable young woman. So I'm going to share my screen for a moment. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the National Library of Israel. For those of you, some of you have visited the National Library, some of you know about it and even use our resources. But for those of you who might not know, the National Library of Israel is located in Jerusalem, and it serves populations within Israel, all the communities and all the populations in Israel, as well as scholars and researchers worldwide. And of course, one of the main topics that we deal with is Israeli and Jewish heritage and culture. So what do we hold in the library? The National Library of Israel is a library, and people assume that it has books, which it does, and it has millions of books. But it's, I think, also important to understand that the library holds manuscripts and personal archives, recorded materials, maps, photos, postcards, and so many other things that you can't find in an ordinary library. And part of the role of the National Library of Israel is to preserve these beautiful treasures. So our main collections are Judaism, Islam and Middle East, Israel and Humanities, where again we strive to have the best collections in all of these fields. Our Islam and Middle East collection, for instance, is one of the largest in the region, and we're very proud of some of the very, very old Qurans and manuscripts that we hold in the library. And like I said before, we serve all populations, and we have activities in the library for students in Israel in Hebrew and in Arabic. And my role in the library is global Jewish education. So that means that I work with educators as yourselves and in other languages, English primarily, but also French and German, and maybe others in the future. So what are the library's role, and how do we see the library's role today? I think a lot of libraries in the world are thinking about that question. What is the role of a library in a digital age? So we see ourselves as the institution that is in charge of the memory of Jewish and Israeli culture. So our first and foremost role is to preserve the treasures of these cultures, but we also want to make them accessible. And that's part of what you'll get a taste of today. We want to make the treasures not just safe, and some of the things that we hold in the library need special temperature and special conditions, but we want to make them accessible, because what is it? What's the meaning of having a beautiful artifact or item or manuscript or book or map if no one can see it, and only just a few researchers in the world? So we really work hard, especially in the education department, to make these treasures accessible. And of course, we still promote research in the academic world. We also want to connect people. And I think what we're doing today is part of that role. And we want to create new knowledge. And when I think of new knowledge, it's not just scholars who create new knowledge in terms of researching Jewish culture and Israeli culture, but also us as educators who really think of new ways to engage our students. So what you're looking at here is the new building that is almost finished. We're moving into it in a few months. And you can get a glimpse of just the way how accessible it's going to be and how beautiful it's going to be. And so that we can fill our role as the institute that's in charge of passing over these treasures to the next generations. So just to give you a glimpse of what the building will look like. Today, we also have reading rooms, of course, but they don't look quite like this. And we're going to have plenty of room to have visitors, tourists, and students. So if you or your students or someone from your school or your community is planning a visit to Israel, please be in touch. We're more than happy to have you and to we have activities designed for children, for teenagers, for educators worldwide. So we really encourage you to come to the building. what I want to, again, I'm just going through this quickly because this isn't our main focus, but it just gives you a glimpse into our activities and the kinds of things that we're going to have, especially in the new building. My role, again, in the Department of Education is to be a resource for educators. So it divides into two main areas. One is professional development, like this webinar, and another is educational resources that we'll present here. And I hope that all of you are familiar with our website, but we're going to take a little look at it in a minute, and you'll be able to see how to navigate it. It's divided into four main sections, where the teaching resources such as lesson plans and activity pages are in the Learn and Play section. You also have a section called Discover, where you can access primary sources directly from the National Library of Israel. We also have, and this is where Chana Senesh, the time capsule, is a section called Experience, where we've made kits in different themes. One of the programs we have there as well is for bar and bat mitzvah kids. And we have a section for our webinars and our professional development, where you will find the recording of this session once it's over, and you can share it with your colleagues. But we also have previous sessions, some that we've done together with Centropa. We have we've been in collaboration with Centropa for a few years already, and it's a really important collaboration because I think we can bring some of the treasures that have the national and historical items, whereas Centropa collects the more personal and family artifacts. And together, I think we really bring a beautiful narrative of stories from individuals and communities. So what guides us in all the activities we create is how to create meaningful learning with primary sources. And what we hope to achieve is to show the students how you can get an authentic glimpse into the past by looking at the original primary source, and not just thinking about someone who wrote about the event, but actually seeing an original document or an original photo, etc., from the event itself. We want to encourage kids to ask questions. We want them to be curious. So as much as it's sometimes hard for us, we want the activities to be led by the children's curiosity and them to ask the questions, not us. And of course, we always want to forge a personal connection. And we find that creativity is one of the tools to enhance that personal connection and make kids feel that they have something to contribute, something to say, something to add about what we're learning. So we guide our learning activities in 4 stages. We first observe. We give the primary source an opportunity to speak for itself. And like I said, we want the kids to be interested and notice what sparks their attention, and not just tell them, here, notice this and notice that. And you'll see an example of that in the Chana Senesh Time Capsule. Of course, learning doesn't stop in that first impression, but we want the kids to dig deeper. We want them to inquire. We want them to learn how to organize this data, understand in what context this is, and ultimately, like I said, to connect and forge their own personal connection and find relevance and express themselves and be creative. So this is our website, and I'm going to stop sharing because we're going to go directly to the website itself to see this program about Chana Senesh, and then I'll show you also how to navigate where to find it within our website. What's important to understand is that, first of all, I'm here for any questions. Even after this webinar, I'm more than happy to be in touch one-on-one and hear your questions, your comments, of course, to hear about how it's going in the classroom, as if you're trying these different materials. And what's important to understand about our website is that we try to organize it by topic. So if you're looking for something about Israel or the Jewish calendar, it'll be rather easy for you to navigate. But we've also organized it by type, and that's what I showed you in the presentation. So it's 2 different kinds of menus that can help you navigate and find what you're looking for. So if you click onto this experience section, or you can also find it down here if you just click over here on one of the sections. So in the experience section, you will find, like I said, you will find the Chana Senesh Time Capsule and a few other things that we have. Again, you can look at them at a later time. So if I click on the Chana Senesh Time Capsule, I'll arrive at this page. Maybe some of you have seen this page when you were signing up for this webinar and you had a chance to look at it a little bit. And I just want to say a few words, kind of a behind the scenes of this, of creating this activity. We really tried to think about what would make Chana Senesh's personality and character and her really special background relevant for kids today. And also still preserve, of course, her historical, I would say, role, or the story of her in the context of World War II and Jewish culture and Israeli culture. So I'm gonna share with, I have to optimize this for sound, so just a second. I'm gonna share the screen with the sound, and just give me, I just wanna make sure that it's working properly, because we're gonna watch a short video right now. So just let me know, someone should unmute themselves and let me know if it's working properly.
Let's take a journey through time. The year 1939.
Yes, we can hear.
Place, Budapest, Hungary. She's leaving everything. At 19 years old, Chana Senesh packed her bags and said goodbye. The land of Israel was calling her. Fast forward. It's 1944. Chana Senesh is back in Hungary. She's on a mission, but she's been caught. What happened? What was her mission? What was her story? Now you have a mission to complete. The National Library of Israel has given you access to precious artifacts from Chana Senesh's life. You will receive a time capsule containing these items, clues and activities that you must complete before time runs out. Decipher these authentic documents and photos. Explore the poetry and journal entries that Chana wrote until her very last day. In order to discover Chana's story and reveal her final secret message. Just like a real historian, you'll be transported back in time. Chana was a brave young woman who fought for what she believed in. She was just 23 when she lost her life. And her legacy is our legacy. Her past is our past. Let's keep it alive. Let's bring history to life. Are you ready?
So the purpose of that video that we just saw is to help you as educators make this story, frame it for your students in a way that will be accessible, that will kind of give them some kind of mission or some kind of activity that they know that they're going into now. We first created the actual time capsule with all of the resources we're going to look at in a moment, but we really felt that the video could help, again, give some kind of context and kind of maybe even some excitement in the classroom to start this process of learning and experiencing this. So as you can see on the website, we have 3 sections where the first one is the mission cards themselves. We're going to take a look at an educator's guide that refers to not only the actual mission cards, but the setting and the different like tips and ways that you can make this experience even stronger or even more meaningful. And of course, there are answer cards so that if you are concerned or if you're not sure what the answers are, you have them accessible for yourself. So let's take a moment to look at the mission cards themselves. I'm going to do this as a presentation, but it's a PDF file. And I'm going to encourage you, again, it's not meant to be a digital activity. This is meant to be printed, of course, the best quality you can, and the best would be in color. We try to be sensitive to the fact that maybe not everyone will be able to print it in color. So you'll see that the cards themselves, it's possible to print it in black and white and still achieve a similar, the similar quality. But again, if you can print it in color, I would also suggest, and I've done this with some groups that I've met in person, to print each one of these slides on half of an A4, meaning make it a postcard size or slightly bigger, an A5 size. And we have these instructions also in the educator's guide so that the students feel like they're holding a card, a mission card, and not just a piece of paper. So looking at the instructions, every group would need to get one of these kits. There are 6 different missions. So basically, if you want to divide your class into a few groups, and each, let's say, 4 or 5 students work together, and then kind of have it as a competition maybe, or, it's a race for time, because that's part of how we frame this whole activity, then you would have to make enough copies for each one of the groups. Now, each one of the missions that we created focus on one aspect of Chana Senesh's life. Now, you'll see that this is also an opportunity to learn more about Chana. After the session, and maybe at the end of the session, we'll look at it together, but we'll also send you a link to a page on the NLI website that really has all of Chana Senesh's biography, the different stations she went through during her life, and all of the artifacts that we have in the archives that you can see on the NLI website. So it's important that you learn a little bit about Chana before you use this activity. But you'll see that what we try to do in the mission cards is to focus on different aspects of her life and give a little intro that will also help you, but also help your students to have some sense of who Chana Senesh was and what her background was. So Chana Senesh was born in Hungary, and her family was a very intellectual family. Her father himself was a writer, a journalist, and we see that definitely got passed over to Chana, who was a remarkable writer from a very, very young age, and we'll see that very soon. She would write poetry, and we even have a notebook in the library of a collection of her poems from age 6 that she didn't even know how to write yet, but her grandmother would write. She would dictate it to her, and her grandmother wrote down these poems. She really was a very creative young woman, and she comes from a background of a family that really does have that ability to support her creative writing. And so it's very, very special, and we'll see a few examples of that soon. So in the first mission, we want to get to know Chana, where she was born, and her family. So what we did was we brought and again, you would print this out and give it to the students to look at. Each one of these photos is a photograph that we have in our collections. And what the students need to do is they need to match the different rubrics from this card, the 10 different rubrics, and find which picture matches what it says here. So if it says Sweet 16, they need to kind of figure it out. Now, some of these, of course, are easier to figure out than others. So in a process of elimination, they can probably find most of them. And the idea is, again, to start with something that shows us the very personal and individual aspects of Chana Senesh's identity. No one starts out being a soldier in life, and definitely Chana Senesh didn't expect to go through all the things that she did at this age. So we're getting to know her. We're getting to know her family background, her brother Giora, or George, and it's just a really special thing that we can see these pictures. And we'll talk also about how we received all of these artifacts. The second mission is really to get to know Chana Senesh as a writer. And like I said, she was writing from a very, very young age. And one of the things that she created was a little family newspaper. And she called it The Little Seneshes. I mean, there are some Hungarians here in the audience who can probably pronounce the title of the newspaper better than I can. So if one of you wants to kind of just read it to us, you can. Mirush, maybe, I don't know, or Esther?
Yeah, I'm happy. I just don't see it right now. Kis Szenesek lapja. Yeah. Which means so, the newspaper of the little Seneshes.
Right. So this is, Chana Senesh was the editor-in-chief of this newspaper at the age of 7, 8. She was already writing a newspaper of her own. Now, keep in mind, her father was a journalist, so this wasn't foreign to her. And she was very much encouraged to write. And but really, we can see that she was also a gifted writer. It wasn't just because her parents supported her. And what we wanted to do in this mission is maybe even bring a little bit of humor, as hard as that might seem, into the story of Chana Senesh, because again, for young kids today, it's not so relatable to think about someone like Chana Senesh, who found herself after she had immigrated to Israel and moved to Sdot Yam. She was one of the founders of this kibbutz Sdot Yam up north. World War II breaks out, and she decides to become a soldier in the British Army and help the Jewish people in Europe. And I know it's also a topic of controversy. Like, she was obviously Hungarian, born in Hungary, but also Jewish. And she makes a very difficult decision to basically go back to Hungary, but this time as part of the British Army and as a Jewish young woman who wants to help fight against the Nazis. And unfortunately, she gets caught and in her mission, and she's ultimately executed. So again, how can you bring a story like that and make it interesting and even, I would say, light in the eyes of young students today? Well, we thought that going back to who Chana was as a child and kind of seeing how playful she was and how creative she was is a very important part of learning about her and who she was. And we thought that using Google Translate might also make some comic moments maybe in the learning process. So you're looking at this, and I apologize that it's lopsided right now, because again, we expect you to print this out and give it to the kids. So this is one of the editions, one of the pages of the little Seneshes, and I'll show it to you afterwards in the answer cards. What we suggest to do is to translate it through Google Translate and see and basically see what you get. And I'm gonna move to the answer cards for a moment, just so that you can see what the answer really is. So like I said before, you have all the answers to all of the riddles and all of the missions. So here are the photographs we looked at before. And in this mission of Lost in Translation, you can see the real translation of this little article that you see in the mission cards. Now, I can tell you from people who speak Hungarian and from doing this ourselves, when you put, let's say, even just the title, the Little Seneshes newspaper, doesn't really translate through Google Translate, because the name Senesh also means a tugboat or something, or a coal mine, right? Mirush. Senesh means a coal mine.
Sen is coal, so it's like made of coal or something like.
Right. So when you put this in Google Translate, you'll get something a little bit confused, or maybe something that doesn't seem right, or sentences that don't make sense. And then part of the task that we're giving the kids is to try to figure out what it really says. And again, you as educators have the answer, and you can try to lead them to think about maybe where there are mistakes or where it doesn't really seem right. And again, the idea is also for our students to get into the shoes of a historian, because historians often find manuscripts or documents where they don't really know how to decipher all of the words, either because it's an ancient language or a language that they don't understand. Sometimes they need to go to an expert to get something translated. Maybe it's a language that has changed over the years and they don't really understand what it says. So we're trying to give the kids in this time capsule activity, we're trying to give them this experience of a riddle, of being detectives, of trying to figure something out that doesn't just present itself to them in the beginning. So with the pictures, it's obviously a little bit easier. And we also give them the answers, and they just have to mix and match. They just have to find the right one. But here we're trying to practice this skill of being a detective and trying to figure out by clues or maybe by context what this can mean. So again, you as educators, you know your students best, and you'll see what they are experiencing while they're doing it, and you'll make the decision if you want to maybe give them a hint, or if you want to tell them, ultimately, if you want to tell them the answer. But keep in mind that all of this activity is in different groups, and if you can imagine your classroom divided into a few groups, it's also a little bit of a competition. So maybe there are some groups that figured it out and others that haven't. You can also, by the way, decide if you're going to let each group continue to the next mission, whether or not they've completed this one, and if they can do it in a different order. You don't necessarily have to do it in the order that we did it. You can also give them all of the envelopes in advance, but that's up to you already how you want to build it. And I think it also depends on the age of your students and how much they can, you know, manage their time. But again, that's yet another skill that we want to practice with them. How, you know, they have a task, they have six different missions, and they have to plan their time. And if they see that one mission is taking them more than 8 minutes or so, they know they need to keep on going. So I'm going for a moment back to our to the mission cards. And we saw that we had the pictures, and we had the little Senesh's newspaper and the translation from Hungarian. Now, by the way, Hungarian educators in the room, you obviously your students will know Hungarian and they'll be able to understand it easily. And I think, again, it's something to think about what you would like to do with this item. Maybe you would, I don't know, create a question or something they would like to do based on this little article, because of course they know how to translate it. Even though part of the task is just, you saw that it's printed and typed. So even just typing the text itself into Google is part of the idea, that they have to read it and maybe work together with each other. One person says the letters and the other one is typing. So again, I'm actually interested to hear maybe afterwards we'll leave some time for comments and for questions in Hungary, what you would do with that mission. So mission number 3 the theme is journey. We saw family before, and now this is her journey, basically where she's from and where she's going. And in order to fill this mission, you need to download one app, and we have a QR code to that app right here, and it's a free app, of course. You also, we try to keep it simple. This isn't a very digitally complicated activity, but we also wanted to make it interesting. And you'll see that this app, basically, when you hover over a text, it presents, all of a sudden you'll see that something pops up. I don't know if some of you already tried this, but definitely try it before you show it to your students. And it's enough to download it on one device, on one phone, if you want to do it on your phone, and then and the students don't have to download it onto their own phone. But you can also, after the activity, uninstall it, and it's really a very light app and free. So the idea is that Chana Senesh, born in Hungary, decides to make Aliyah. She decides to move to Israel at the age of 18. And we have in the library one of the most moving items I think we have from her collection is we have her diaries. And as you understand, she wrote a lot. So even in her diary, she writes almost daily. And there's one page where she's writing in Hungarian for many months. And then there's the page where she starts writing in Hebrew. And she writes in Hebrew, from this day forth, I've decided to only write in Hebrew. And indeed, the rest of her diaries are in Hebrew. So it's just, again, she was a remarkable young woman. And so she decides to make Aliyah, and she applies to a school in a place called Nahalal. It's an agricultural school for girls. And we see here the letter that she wrote to the principal in order to be accepted to this school. And again, some of these items are not the right way, just because, again, you would have to print this, and you will see that if you use this app, and just notice the icon of the app over here on the page so that it's clear that you downloaded the right app. It's called Zapar. This whole letter is in Hebrew, and we don't assume that any of your students know Hebrew. Maybe, again, you can also facilitate this and say, it says Nahalal, it says, it's a letter, it's addressed to the principal of a school, but we don't expect your students to know Hebrew and to be able to read this. That's why we're using the augmented reality, where what they do is, again, they hover over the letter with the app, and what pops out is the translation of some of the elements that answer the questions in the mission card. So here we have her passport and her Aliyah certificate. And the idea is, again, looking back at the mission, they need to answer 4 questions. Which city in Hungary did she come from? When did she receive her Aliyah certificate? Which school did she apply to? And what other names was she known by? So I can tell you that all this information will be, of course, it's also in the answer cards, but it pops up when you use the app. So the school is Nahalal. You can see in her passport that she also goes by Anna, A-N-N-A, and the dates of her aliyah and all of that. Okay, so again, I'll show you in the page we have about Chana Senesh and NLI. You'll see that all the information and her entire biography is there. But again, anything you need for this activity is in the educator's guide of this activity. You don't have to feel the need to go research about Chana Senesh. Every piece of information that your students are going to be exposed to, you'll also know the answers to in advance. So now this station is about courage. We thought that, of course, Chana Senesh is an individual who really acted in courage throughout her entire life. And so deciding to become a parachuter in the Second World War, she wasn't the only one. She's maybe one of the more famous ones, but there was a group of young individuals from Europe who were on the same mission with her. Some others also got caught. And what we suggest here is to make a graffiti wall. So of course, this is more of an educational activity to create a wall. It could be a digital wall, it could be a physical wall, for kids to write what courage is for them. And we purposely use the word courage and not other words. We didn't use sacrifice, and we didn't use other words that might be connected to Chana's story. Again, we're being very mindful of how to connect young students today to her story and for it to be an inspiration, but we also, we understand that her story is not a simple one. So we were constantly mindful of that. So people can write on sticky notes, or again, in any way that you would like. In the educator's guide, we have some ideas about how to do this. And you can write what courage means to you. And then, of course, you can have a discussion. So we have here an item, which is a stamp that was issued in memory of Chana Senesh. The fifth mission, we called it Heart, and it goes to Chana's connection with her family, and specifically here with her brother. Chana Senesh, her father passed away at a young age, and she was very much connected also to her mother and her brother. This idea of her having to part with her family was not easy for her. And what she would do is she would write letters. Again, it's a discussion in and of itself. People don't really write letters to each other anymore, not in the same way they used to. But it's a really, really beautiful way to learn about the relationship and the closeness between Chana and her brother, Giora, or George. And another, I would say another goal of this mission specifically is to give the kids a sense of what the reality was like in that time. Chana wanted to write her brother a letter. She had to write it in English because of the censor that was going on. Of course, the British Army would censor any letter that would come from the soldiers. And that's actually helpful for us because, again, our material is in English. And it's nice that we can offer something in English here that was written by her. She wrote in so many different languages. And what we want to show the students here is there are some words that we've censored in one of these letters that she wrote to her brother, and they have to guess what the words are. Now, again, we've erased these words, not the real censorship in England, but again, it's a little bit of a work of a detective because it's not so easy to read this handwriting. It takes some time maybe, and they have to guess which words are missing here. And again, they have a list of the words. And it's also, you can see a little bit of humor here because at the end of her letter, and we'll look at the answer card, at the end of her letter, Chana writes to her brother in this letter, she writes, wait a second. She writes in her letter, for this reason, I give you the right even to forge my signature, hoping you will not make use of it for high financial obligations. So she has, even in these moments where she's missing home, she's on this very dramatic and life-endangering mission. She's writing a letter to her brother and she keeps it light. She writes thousands of kisses to you and to your friends. And she writes in the beginning that, she realizes that people are probably cross with her, they're angry at her for leaving. And and she asks her brother George to please try to explain the situation. And she says, if not, they will forgive me later. Again, this is just a very, I think, touching item that just shows us how sensitive and really amazing Chana Senesh was, and how she was thinking of others even in these moments. So we're moving on to basically to the last mission. So after the letter to her brother, we see the poem, and we call this legacy, because really Chana Senesh left in terms of what people remember from her, and at least in Israel, she's become really an iconic figure. And like I said, there were other parachuters as she was, but her family and just the way Israeli culture preserved her memory is very unique. And there were, again, though, despite the fact that there were others who had a very similar story, but there was something about Chana Senesh that was always very special. And one of the things that made her special was the fact that she was a poet and a writer. And so a very famous song of hers that is known as Eli Eli, or Halicha Keisaria, is very, very famous and well known. And what we've done here is we've put the words in English and in Hebrew, but also in the Hebrew in the transcription. And what we're asking the kids to do is organize the poem in the right order. What you can also see here is the notes written for this poem. And again, we encourage you to also have the poem in the background. We have a direct link to a YouTube video that has the poem, and you can put it in the background. So here I'm showing you where that is in the answer cards, where we've suggested for each. In the answer cards, you also have all the suggestions for what equipment you're going to need, etc. So this is a click that actually works, and you can put the poem, you can put the song in the background while they're doing this, and maybe some of them will also recognize some of the words, and that might even help them. At this point, what we suggest is, okay, so there were 6 missions. Maybe one of the groups has finished all the missions on time, maybe not. But once, again, we imagine that this would take about an hour. So if you only have a 45-minute lesson, you might need to take a longer time to do it, or break it up into 2, which isn't ideal. And then what we suggest is, like we said here, stop the clock. You gather everyone together. And first of all, we want to learn about her story and just make sure that everyone did all the missions, and just to make sure that they've understood who Chana was and had a chance to really get to know her and her legacy. And then basically we talk to them about her final note. Her final note, and again, this is a really just remarkable story. She was executed in Hungary, and after her death, her belongings were sent to the family, and also her friends found a suitcase with all of her personal belongings under her bed in Sdot Yam. And for many years, those things were, the family kept them, and only just really a few of the items were shared. And around 2 years ago, the family, it's basically Giora, her brother's kids, were in charge of her archive, and they decided to give the archive to the library. And one of the most really amazing and really dramatic items we have is the note that she hid in the hem of her dress when she was executed, and it was found later, and it was a note she wrote to her mother. And in the note, of course, it's in Hungarian, and the note says, I don't know what to tell you. I will only say this: 1,000 thanks and more, and forgive me if you can. After all, you will understand better than anyone else that words are not necessary now. With great love, your daughter. And this is a note that her mother, Catherine, found later. And this was the last thing she wrote. And we want to show the students this note as well. Here it is, again in Hungarian, and she hid it again in the hem of her dress, so that, hoping, I guess, that someone would find it, and indeed they did. So now we also have a suggestion here besides the mission cards themselves, of, let's talk a little bit about this activity. Once we finished it, it was maybe challenging. We were detectives, we were historians, we're trying to figure something out. And ultimately, we had a chance to encounter a remarkable young woman who had a very interesting and dramatic life story and contributed something to the Jewish people. And I think it really is important to give some space for the kids to share, like how they feel, what did they learn, what would you like to ask? We have some tips here or ideas about how to make a quiet space and time for the kids to express what they were thinking, or have some time maybe to also kind of think about what they've learned, and to share anything that they've learned from today, or anything that they're feeling from learning what we did. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And first of all, I'd love to open it up for questions or comments. Like I said, I'll also show you the page we have about Chana Senesh, and Esther will also share it in an email after the session. So if there are any questions or comments or thoughts, I'd love to hear.
There also some questions came in the chat.
Okay.
So maybe you want to repeat them, those who wrote those questions.
Now I can also see the chat. Okay, so people ask about what age is it for? So someone answered, right, like from 6th to 10th grade, for sure. I think kids even as young as 5th grade might be able to use this, depending on your students. But that was the age we were thinking about. Really, middle schoolers. You see that it's not, again, an older audience, like 11th or 12th graders might feel that this is a little childish for them. It is geared more to a younger audience. But again, the topic is a little heavy. So you have to think about your students and, what they can, how you should frame this for them best. But yes, I really imagine that the best age for this is 6th to 8th graders, actually. But yeah, other questions maybe that weren't in the chat, or that someone wants to ask, or maybe make a comment about?
There is a question about the time frame of this time capsule.
Okay, so again, ideally, we think that this should take about, I would say, in total 90 minutes. Like, that's the ideal time frame. We understand that not everyone can do that, but you can do it also in 1 hour, because what we did the math, and I'll show you this. I'll share my screen again to show you where you can find this information in the educator's guide, which is one of the files in the website. You'll see that we have some ideas for what ages it is for and how long it could take. So our calculation was, you want to do some kind of opening, you want to show the video, and you want to frame it and divide them into groups. And then the question is, if you can allocate 30 minutes for the 6 tasks, then they only have 5 minutes for each one. And it's a lot of pressure, but that also keeps the learning, I would say, the rhythm of the learning, like high intensity. And then you have to keep around at least 15 or 20 minutes to the closing, like what I was presenting before, for the kids to really think about what they learned and talk about what they feel, and not just for them to finish the class and leave. Now, again, ideally, I think it should be closer to 80 minutes if you can. And this way, each task isn't just 5 minutes, it's more like 7 or 8 minutes. But again, we know that we're always limited as teachers. We don't always have a full hour or hour and a half. This, we also imagine, can be done not in a regular class or regular lesson, but on a special day, maybe if you're learning about inspirational figures in history, or if you are thinking about what to do before the International Holocaust Memory Day, or Yom HaShoah in the Israeli Holocaust Remembrance Day. It could also be something that has to do with any other topic, maybe with, again, depending on what you're teaching, but you saw there's poetry, there's a family history, if you're doing a project about family, etc. So you have to kind of try to carve out the time. Again, at least an hour. It really does need at least an hour. And if we're already looking at the educator's guide, so I was referring to some of the slides here before, but you have a little bit of, the basic background about Chana. and what we hope to achieve in this and what equipment you would need. Again, here is where you can find to download that app and what else you might need, because what we envision is that you print these and in a small size and then put them in envelopes and make the whole thing like kind of very experiential. Of course, you don't have to, but it would make a big difference. We even thought of this idea that maybe if you have an old suitcase or something like that, you can also use that, but that's already, every person has to see what they can do. So we have here some ideas for customization, like how to print it. If you want maybe the one about the photographs, you could put in an old album. Again, depending on how you're going to use it. If you're using it for your class and that's it for one time, that's one thing. But if you're making a school activity out of it, maybe you can invest a little bit more time in doing it. So that's the Educator's Guide. Again, it's worth reading and going through it and seeing all the ideas of how to, I would say, best practices, how to use it and make it like the most experiential you can. More questions or comments?
Wow, Shuvi, it's fantastic.
Thank you. I really do hope, again, we create things at the National Library and we hope that educators find them meaningful. Each and every one of you sitting in this room right now, and for those of you who are going to watch the recording later, I'm really, really begging you to be in touch, to write me an email, say, Shuvi, I tried this and this was wonderful. This wasn't really good. This didn't work. My students love this activity and this one was too hard for them. That's the kind of feedback we need, because the truth is this is just the first kit that we've created, and we're planning on making more about other inspirational women who have totally different stories. And we really, really would love your feedback in order to learn from you.
I have a question. I was wondering, are there any schools in Israel who are named after Chana Senesh? I seem to think that maybe there might be, and I'm wondering whether maybe it would be a good idea to connect them to kids who are doing this activity.
Yeah, there's a Chana Senesh school actually in the US, in Brooklyn, New York.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know of a Chana Senesh school here in Israel. But you're right, it is interesting. And again,
I have one in Or Akiva.
Ah, okay, so there you have it.
And that's actually very close. That's very close to Sdot Yam. That's probably why.
Maybe that's why. Yeah.
Yeah. I should have known that. I live here, near there.
Ah, really? So here, while we're talking, I also want to just show you this page. And again, we're going to share this link. You'll actually also notice that Chana and Senesh are spelled differently in so many different places. Of course, there's the Hungarian spelling and the English spelling, and then the Hebrew spelling. But here you can find, I just want you to be acquainted with this page. This page isn't geared for educators. It's on the NLI main website, not on the educators website. And it doesn't really, again, it doesn't have educators in mind, but just people who want to learn about Chana Senesh. So first of all, you have her life story, and you can expand this as well. And again, this is where you can really find all the information about her artistic legacy, and you can see some of the documents we have in the archive. So we chose this one letter where she applied to the school, but there are other letters that she wrote. And of course, each one of these, if you open it, you'll be able to look closer. We have some of the personal belongings. Again, this just gives you a glimpse. We had to choose from within all of these items what to focus on, but there are many, many more things that we didn't include in the time capsule. Some other documents from her life, and again, if you speak Hungarian, you could probably appreciate some of these. And again, you'll see that there are more if you slide this way. And here, we have certificates she received, and here I'm really encouraging you to read these from our blog. Our blog, really, in general, is a good resource, I find, for educators, because it takes things that we have in the library and kind of tells the story behind them. And we don't always have that information, so it's really useful. And again, in the blog, it's just exploring different aspects of Chana Senesh's life. And again, that's what we hope to do also in the time capsule for the students. So I encourage you to read that. We have her notebooks, like here you can see her learning Hebrew, and the library notebook. I think this is the third diary where she starts writing in Hebrew, etc. We have her poems. Again, she wrote in Hebrew at some point, even though it wasn't her native language, and she wrote beautiful poetry. and the little Seneshes that we saw one page of, but there are multiple editions of that newspaper. And that's it. So really, again, we're going to share this link. I really encourage you to learn more about her before you start the activity in the classroom, just so that you feel confident that if the kids have a question. But the truth is, I feel like in these cases, as educators, we can always say, you know what, I don't know, let's explore more. Maybe you should look it up on the internet and see what you can find. Maybe you can answer that question, because you're not expected to know every detail about Chana Senesh's life. And it is also, again, historically, it's just a really interesting, I would say, window into this time. Just in general, Jewish soldiers in the British Army is an issue, is a whole topic in and of itself that you can explore in history class. Anyway, so that was the tip of the iceberg. So if again, if anyone has any other last questions or comments, I'm happy to hear before we need to finish.
Yes, I would like to just say a few words from the international perspective of the Zentropa Jewish Network and us being from so many countries and speaking so many languages. So what I see in this material is that, yes, it might be a plus work to you to translate it to your respective languages, because obviously your students might not know English in that way, you're not English teachers, so on. But I think it's a very well designed and very easy to use and translate materials. And what I also like very much about Chana Senesh, or Anikó Senes, how we call her in Hungary, that it's such a multi-phase story. We can deal with it from the perspective of women's stories, from the perspective of young women trying to, be artistic and find their way as a poet. But I think it's also very important from the perspective of showing the resistance, which we always hear during the Holocaust, that there was not enough resistance, people did not stand up. Of course, it's a special story of someone coming from the British Army, but still I think it shows loads of courage and again, her story has such a multiple so many elements that I really think that it is useful in many aspects, and you can just pick up some pieces, don't need to use everything, even if you just find one angle of her story that could be nice and interesting. And I think for teenagers, learn about her way of loving her parents and engaging with her peers, and finding her own paths. That's also something very interesting, and I think very modern in a way.
I agree. Yes, she's very inspirational. Okay. So really, it was great seeing you all, and I really hope to hear more from you and to hear how it's going. And we'll be meeting again at other webinars. And again, we'll send you, I guess, in an email, all the links that you need. That's it.